Okay, we're going to look at adjustment layers now. Adjustment layers are layers which allow you to adjust your image, make it better, manipulate it, etc. Most common things you will do when you're using Photoshop to make your photographs better. It allows you to edit them and sort them out. So here we've got a highway photograph. It's a bit dark, so let's go down to the black and white circle. This is where all of our adjustment layers are. We're going to start off with levels because we want to change the levels of light and dark. So I can see this histogram, blacks or shadows, midtones and greys, and highlights or whites. So let's drag this down because it's a little bit far away from our graph. Oh, we've increased the levels and it looks a lot better. We can also bring the blacks in, which will give us more contrast. If we pull up or down the midtone slider, we can fill the shadows, and I'll just mess around with this till I'm happy. It looks cool. It's on its own layer, that's why it's called an adjustment layer, and we can turn the visibility on and off and see the before and the after. Let's mess around with some hues and some saturations. Now here we've got a photograph of a flower. Let's go to the black and white circle. This time let's click hue saturation. Let's adjust the hues. Let's just move these. Look what happens. All of the colors are shifting. We can also increase the intensity of those colors, or we can bring that down to a negative and desaturate the image. We can also adjust the lightness, or if we click the colorize tool here, we can change the image into a monochromatic one, which means there's only one color affecting all of the image. So that's hue saturation, on and off. Again, it's on its own layer, makes it great for us. Let's have a look at this photograph. Let me zoom in. It's a car lot, and we may just want to change the color only of the car lot itself, so the red. So we are selective color. We want to select reds because it's the reds that we want to change, and then I can move any of these sliders around and we can just start to get some really interesting looking results. Okay, likewise if I selected the blues and adjusted that, you will see that the blues in this image, which are the sky, some reflections in the car windows, will also be affected. That's selective colour. Here we've got an image of a stadium. The top part looks nicely exposed. It's rather dark down here. This is because it's in shadow, but if we click the half black half white circle and go to curves, we can increase our shadows. So on the left is darks again, on the right is highlights, but this time we can adjust this in the form of a graph. So we can pull up the shadows, we can pull down the midtones, we can increase the light, and we can start to get some detail coming back into that area. Let's just tweak this a bit more. There. So here we go, on and off, and we've just brought out some of the details down here. You can see this cameraman now here, and if we feel that we've lost a bit of contrast by doing this, because essentially we have pulled up the shadows, we can always drop a layers adjustment layer over the top and just bring in a little bit of that contrast back in. Turn both of those off, turn them both on. We've added a levels, which we didn't really need, but we can have that in there if we want. Let's move on. Okay, let's make this image cooler. We can just simply throw on a photo filter, and we will select a blue from here, or we can actually use a filter from here and click cooling filter, and then we can increase how cool we want this image to be. So we can make it moderately cool, or we can go to a warming filter and we can warm the image up more. Those are photo filters. Let's say we want to make this image black and white. We can click the black and white circle and click black and white. The beauty is now we can click this little hand, find part of the image and go to the right to make that part lighter. I'll bring that down to the right to make it darker, and likewise we can do the same with the sky. Okay, let's move on and let's put some of these things into practice. Let's give this image a little bit more contrast. That looks okay. Let's also add a little bit more color into this image. Let's add a photo filter and cool this image even more. And then let's add a curves and just bring up a little bit of the detail into the shadows. And that looks pretty good. Let's look at the before. Let's look at the after. Let's move on. Okay, we can also use the selective color tool to create like a vintage effect. So let's go down to selective color, and with vintage effects you'll find that the shadows and the highlights actually have a certain tint to them. A tint meaning a slight amount of color. So let's click on black. So we see there's a lot of blacks in here, and let's pump in a little bit of red. Okay, we'll move this to the left, so we're actually adding red in the shadows here. That looks quite cool. We can also reduce the blacks in the shadow, which essentially make the image look flatter, less contrasty. Again, kind of like a vintage look. Let's come into the whites and let's boost up the yellows. Again, we can go either way with this. We'll bring down the blacks there. Let's just bring it down here a little bit. That looks kind of nice. We can even mess around with the neutrals, so we can throw in some more yellow if we wish. Can play with cyan. Let's come back into the blacks, adjust this, and of course this is all to taste, however you like to see it. Before, after, something a little bit heavy on the red there. That works better. Okay, so that's selective color and creating a certain look. Now we can also use something called the gradient map. Let's go to gradient map, and all of a sudden the image looks horrific. Let's click on the actual gradient and let's pick something else. I don't know, let's go for something like this. Click OK. Now it doesn't look very good, but just notice we've got two colors. We've got this deep blue, and then it goes into this kind of orange color here, but notice where the blue is on the image and where the yellow is. Let's just turn this on. Let's just turn this off, so we can see the orange is actually in the shadows. So look at all this dark area here around the neck. Turn it on, that's all orange, and all the light area is blue. If we reverse this, we get a reversal. Now all the dark areas are blue and all the lighter areas are orange. So this map is essentially a set of colors which are linking to dark and light. Now if we change the blending mode of this layer to something like soft light and reduce the opacity back to 0 and then bring it up, we can see we've actually giving it a certain stylistic look. Turn this on, turn this off. We can also change the map, and these are lots of different maps you can find. They're normally found here, or you can actually create your own, and we can also change the blending modes to anything we want. Let's go to overlay and let's just see what we get. Okay, so there are gradient maps. Now the main thing is you experiment, you play with all these different things, you see what you get. That way you will learn how adjustment layers work, and you'll become more familiar and more confident in using them.